Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. Billy, a lot of times we've had people that have like, I get out in my woods, I don't know what this is, whether this is native, whether this is invasive, whether this is, should I be looking for this? What should I do? So we're here today to kind of help you with that.
It is a challenge for our folks out there, right? We have so many diverse plants here in Kentucky, not only trees, but other plants as well. And, trying to identify something that may not be normally there can be challenging. But there are some things we can look for, right? And maybe some areas we could start looking for. And fortunately, today we have Miss Frannie Preston is going to be talking about kind of monitoring for invasives, and not only monitoring, but kind of some of the actions we can do once we identify them. So, as our woodland owners are getting out and exploring their woods this spring, as we kind of shift into summer here, it's a great time to really be looking for something that's maybe you hadn't seen before, right? Who's that new character in the play that we need to deal with?
Is it good or bad?
Yeah, right. Is he a villain or not?
Right, exactly.
But what can we do about it? So yeah, really excited to have Frannie on. She does so much for our program here, and I'm excited to have her talk about that as well. And then we also have Dr. Ellen Crocker with us today with another edition of What's Bugging My Tree. And it's been really wet. I heard recently, we're looking 20 plus inches rain this spring already.
Right.
So it's been consistently wet. So that can contribute to some of our disease issues. And Dr. Crocker will be talking about that and kind of making those connections about what folks are seeing out there on their trees right now and what's going on weather-wise. But really excited to have everybody with us. If you all have any questions for Frannie or Dr. Crocker or Renee or myself, please use the chat function. And if you're a YouTube or podcast listener, thank you. But you can hit us up via email at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can respond that way. Really appreciate y'all being with us today, and excited for our guest, Renee.
Yes, definitely. So let's go ahead and get started. Frannie, if you'd like to turn your camera on. Welcome to the show again. We appreciate you being on and going over this topic, because I know a lot of people probably are like, I don't know whether that's invasive or not, and what should I do about it, and that kind of thing. So you're here to kind of clear up that.
Yeah, thankfully we've got some tools to help us make it really easy.
Yeah, wonderful.
All right, so thanks for having me on again today. So again, my name is Frannie Preston, and I'm with UK's Forestry Extension. We're just going to be learning all about monitoring invasive species, not just plants. We've got some projects out of UK about monitoring some insects and pathogens as well. All right, so what is an invasive species? Again, when we're talking about monitoring invasive species, we're talking about looking at the species that are not native to Kentucky, they're not originally from here, and they're causing some sort of harm, which is why we want to be taking a good look at them. And we've got, unfortunately, a whole bunch of different kinds of invasive species in Kentucky. We've got invasive insects, invasive birds, we've got invasive mammals such as cats and rats, we've got invasive diseases and pathogens, we've got invasive plants, and we've got invasive fish. We've got a whole bunch of different invasive species, which is unfortunate, but thankfully every single one of us can help with research by helping to monitor them. So when we're talking about monitoring invasive species, what I mean by that is you're going to take a picture and make an observation of an invasive species that you found either on your property or somewhere where you might be hiking or fishing. You're going to upload them to different sites, which I'll go over in a little bit. And then once they're uploaded, they're shared with different communities of scientists, researchers, and then other citizen scientists. So what is the whole purpose of monitoring invasive species? Well, when you're getting outside and you're helping to monitor invasive species, it's increasing everyone's involvement with conservation, and it's bringing awareness to a lot of these different issues that our ecosystems are facing. When you're monitoring and recording observations and uploading them to these different sites, you're helping to support research, because there's only a small amount of plant scientists and insect scientists who can go out and look and see where all of these different invasive species are. And so the more people that we get on board with it, the better the research can be supported. And then ultimately, it's going to influence management decisions of what species need to be targeted for research and management. So again, the more people out there monitoring invasive species, the better. the more that we know about them, the more we know about where they are and what time of the year they're popping up, the better chance we have of stopping these invasive species from becoming even worse. So how do we even go about identifying invasive species? Well, you can use a few different tools. Of course, you've got field guides, and if you want to look at a really awesome field guide to identifying and controlling invasive plants, we've got a new one up on the website. Just Google Field Guide to Kentucky's Invasive Plants. So you can always use field guides either online or printed out. And then we've got these really cool apps, which is kind of what I'm going to be focusing on today. We've got these free apps that are really awesome to help you identify the species that you're looking at. Some of my favorite identification apps, just for identification, we've got Picture This for identifying plants. We've got Seek, which lines up with iNaturalist, and you can identify plants, animals, fungi, insects, pretty much everything. And then if you're focusing on birds, which we do unfortunately have some invasive birds, you can use the Merlin app to identify them by sight or sound. So those are just a few, but I'm sure that you also have your own, and you can even just Google identification apps in your app store. So where do we want to look for invasive plants? So when you're looking for invasive species, you want to look on the edge of your woodlands, or if you're on a trail, you want to look when you're hiking, you can look on the edge of the trail, because what you're going to be seeing is a lot of invasive species popping up where there's more light. So again, that can be on the trail, that can be on the edge of your woodlands. If you are next to a disturbed area like a roadside or an old hayfield, you can also look for some invasive plants there. That's just typically where you're going to find them the most. Again, in conditions where they have been disturbed, there's disturbed areas, or there's light coming down, just kind of like I pictured in this video. Sorry, I couldn't get the sound to work. But I pointed out a few species in this video. You can see there's some species that you're just really noticing take over. We've got Japanese honeysuckle up at the top that's flowering right now, and you'll also find this flowering right now. Even if you just drive down pretty much any road in Kentucky, you're going to see it. We've got stiltgrass that I pointed out that grows in lower conditions because it's a grass, and then some multiflora rose. So just pointed out where you can find some different invasive species. Again, look at the edge of your woodlands, or if you're hiking, look close to the trail or where there's light shining through, and then look in disturbed areas as well. All right, so that's where you can look for invasive plants. Now, I'm going to point out two different monitoring platforms that you can use that are the most popular. In my opinion, they're the easiest to use. And the first one is iNaturalist. So if you haven't used iNaturalist before, if you're not familiar with it, iNaturalist is used to record biodiversity all over the world, not just in Kentucky. And with iNaturalist, you can report observations. I'll show you what an example of that is. So you can report observations, you can create and join projects and upload observations to different groups. And what makes iNaturalist unique is that it's community-based. I'll show you what that means in a minute, but essentially when you upload these observations, there's a whole community that can look at them and either agree with your identification of them or suggest differences as well. So iNaturalist, you can use it either on a desktop, or you can use it on your phone. And I like to use a combination of both. It's easier to just record the observation on your phone right then and there and upload it. And I like looking at the observations a little bit better on the desktop. If you don't have a smartphone, you can still use it. You can just use your regular camera, upload the pictures to your computer, and then use the site just as the desktop version. So that makes it nice if you don't have a smartphone. And here is what an observation of on iNaturalist would look like. So here's the Japanese honeysuckle that I took a picture of in that video. Again, it's a vining invasive honeysuckle. And when you upload it, you put the location of your species. It will give you suggestions for the identification of your species if you are not familiar with it. And then people can either agree with it or disagree with it. So here's an observation that I made of the hemlock woolly adelgid, which is an invasive insect. And so you can see down there, I posted it, I made the observation, I've got the location and everything to give some more clues of what it might be. And then someone responded to it and said, yes, I agree that this is hemlock woolly adelgid. And then with iNaturalist, once people agree, a couple of people agree with your observation, it's considered research grade. And that just helps people who might be researching a certain invasive species go on there and know which observations are correct. Something else really cool about iNaturalist is that you can create projects or join projects, and these are just kind of groups of observations. So for example, here's a huge one called IMAP Invasives, and this is exploring different invasive species reports all over North America. And it's not just plants, those are just the ones that are shown. So you can join projects like this, and then your observations will automatically be uploaded. So the Japanese honeysuckle observation that I made will automatically be uploaded to this, and then the people who created this project can use it for whatever research purposes they need. All right, so that was iNaturalist. And one of the other most common platforms for reporting invasive species is called EDDMaps or EDD maps. And EDDMaps is similar to iNaturalist, but the difference is that it's specific to reporting invasive species. And so you can go on there, you can report observations. Now the difference is where iNaturalist is your observations are verified by the community. On EDDMaps, the observations are verified by experts. So we have an expert botanist for our state who will go on there and review all the observations before they're posted publicly. And something else really great about EDDMaps is they've got really nice distribution maps and also projected range for where invasive species are predicted to be in the future. So EDDMaps also has a desktop version and then some different apps that you can use on your smartphone. So again, you can use it on your smartphone to make an observation right then and there, or you can use a camera and then record what location you're in, upload it to your computer later. So here's what an observation on EDDMaps might look like. I know it's kind of tiny on there, but here's where I uploaded just some multiflora rows, and you can see that EDDMaps has maybe some more information, such as how big was the infestation, how many plants were there, how dense was it, and things like that. So you can upload a little bit more information when you're uploading it to EDDMaps. And then again, it gets verified by the expert of the state. And then it's posted publicly. So that's how you use reporting websites, iNaturalist and EDDMaps to report observations to help monitor these invasive species. But you can also use these in some other ways. So if you are a land manager or if you're just curious of whether you might be seeing a species, you can go on these websites and type in the species and see if they're found in your area. So there might be an invasive species that you've read an article about or watched a webinar about, and you want to know if it's prevalent in our area, whether you should be looking out for it, whether you should be thinking about controlling it. And you can go onto these sites to see those. So here's what a map of where kudzu has been reported. Obviously, it's probably in more places, but that's where it's had verified reports on EDDMaps as being located. And here's where what it might look like on iNaturalist. So you can see that it's pretty similar. You can just go on there and see where these different species are found. Now, if you are an agent or if you lead a volunteer group in your way, or you just want to get some friends out there involved in monitoring invasive species, there's a few ways you can do that. So when we're engaging the community with monitoring invasive species, we like to have these events called bioblitzes. And if you have not heard of that before, it basically just means an event where you go out and maybe you're trying to have people find as much Japanese honeysuckle as they can in a particular area or across the state. Or you might have it for a specific event. Maybe you want to have people go out on a certain Saturday and find as many invasive species as they can in McConnell Springs Park. So it can look like a few different things. If you're a teacher, I've used this in classrooms before where we've actually had some competitions of who can get the most species on iNaturalist. So when you're doing BioBlitzes, it's really easy. Just create a project on iNaturalist where you can have a group of people go out, join this project, and then record all of their findings. Again, you can also host specific events. And the great thing about monitoring invasive species is that it's not labor intensive and requires zero skill. So if you've got a camera or you've got a smartphone, you can go out and take pictures of these invasive plants or insects, whatever you're finding. The whole family can do it. Anyone of any age can do it. And because it's pretty easy to do. And again, you can make it a competition, and sometimes that helps push people along. Again, with iNaturalist, that's the best way to do that because you can see who made the most observations, who found the most species, and things like that. So some different monitoring projects that you can get involved in are through UK. If you go to the Office of the State Entomologist websites, you can find some different surveys that you can be a part of to find some invasive insects and plants in Kentucky. So again, go to UK's Office of the State Entomologist site. They have a site called Unlucky for Kentucky. It's got some information about different invasive species. And they've got some different citizen science programs where you can go on, you can become a part of it. There's some really cool things to look at, like recording spongy moths, and you can get a kit from your extension office. So go ahead and check out that website. There's some that are more prevalent during the summer, so go ahead and check it out now. You can get a 4-H group involved with it or just yourself involved with it. And here's just an example of one of the invasive insects that they're looking for through the Office of the State Entomologist. This is the spotted lanternfly. You've probably been hearing a little bit about it. It's just reached Kentucky in the past couple of years. You can see it's unfortunately hurting people a little bit more northeast, but it is in our state. So this is just one project that you can get a part of finding these, taking a picture of them, squashing them, and then helping with research to where they are. So thank you all for learning about monitoring invasive species today. If you have any questions today, just feel free to put them in the chat.
That was great. Thank you so much. I downloaded the iNaturalist app while we were talking. And it's funny because there were some, I didn't realize this, but there were some things in my yard, and I was like, I didn't know what it was, and I had taken a picture and sent it to my friend, and she was like, I don't know what that is. And so you could upload that photo, and it was really neat because it was like, well, it's probably this. We're not 100% sure because, but it's probably this. So it was really cool. I appreciate you giving us that.
Yeah, you get to learn a whole lot of different animals and plants and mushrooms along the way when you're doing this. So that's one of my favorite things about iNaturalist as well, is you just get to learn so many different things around you.
I love it on vacation, where I'm like seeing different stuff that I don't normally get to see. So it's always cool.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah. Now, I didn't even check, does it do like different trees and things like that? So it's like trees that I might not see, like if I'm in, Myrtle Beach or someplace like that, and I'm like, what is that tree?
Yes.
So does it do that too? Okay.
Yes, I've used
really neat.
it all over the world for all different sorts of things. It's not just plants, it's not just insects. The key to when you're seeing something new, especially plants, is to take a bunch of different pictures. So if it's got leaves and fruits and flowers and bark, take a bunch of different pictures from different angles and upload it, and that'll give you a more correct identification.
It's good for gardeners too, because I use it to identify insects and how to treat them.
Is this good or bad?
Yes.
All right, we did have some questions. I know Ellen in the background has answered some of them, but they wanted to know, one was between the iNaturalist and iNaturalist Classic, if you knew the difference. And I think Ellen has been answering those, but I didn't know if you had some more ideas on that one.
Yeah, I actually have not started to use the iNaturalist app since I just have seen in the past couple of weeks that they've switched to new apps. So I don't have a great answer for that other than what Ellen said. It's the same site. I think they just made some updates to the app, but you can still use the classic app. I have continued to use it, and it'll still upload your observations just fine.
Okay. So the other person wanted to know, what is the best way to learn what to get rid of on an invasive on your own property? So what's the best way to get rid of?
Frannie, can I take this one real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're a woodland owner, join us in the 2025 Kentucky Woodland Owner Short Course. All right, Frannie, your turn.
In
So
June
what
and July.
Billy said, we've got different resources for invasive plants or other invasive species on UK's website. Again, that field guide, which I'll put a link to, you can use that and has some different control methods that you can use. But if you don't know whether it's an invasive species, when you upload it to iNaturalist, it will tell you this species is from Kentucky or this species is from Eastern Asia. And so you can go ahead and identify the species with iNaturalist or with Seek or with one or Plant Picture This, different apps like that, and then just do some more research on it. It'll be pretty easy if it's a prevalent invasive species to find that information, and then just look on UK's website. Again, I'll put that new identification booklet in the chat, and then that'll give you some management options.
And I noticed some of them are paid and some of them are free. Is there advantages to having a paid one, or
I
have you
never use the paid one. I only use
Oh,
iNaturalist and EdMaps, and those are two of the most prominent ones,
Mhm.
and they're free. So that's a good, so it's a good, bonus to using them.
Exactly. Free is always good.
Yeah.
Let
Good
me,
stuff, Franny. As
um,
always.
think that's all the questions we got them answered. I believe so. Oh, there's comes another one. Let's see. So someone just came in from a walk and took a picture of a tree just using the iPhone camera and looked up a plant feature, identified a young tree as a white ash. Should this be reported to UK Extension or Kentucky Forestry for confirmation?
I don't necessarily know there's a confirmation needed in that unless you're trying to take some action related to that. I mean, are you thinking about treating it for emerald ash borer or trying to protect it from it? Um, you could always also send us pictures. We get pictures all the time from people that are struggling with identification. And often, if they're high enough quality images, we can
Protect it.
tell what it is. But
So they want to protect it.
yeah, but I don't think that we are like tracking the lingering ash or anything like that. I mean, Dr. Crocker may have some kind of other information on that, but I know at one point we were doing a lingering ash project where we were trying to track them. But Dr. Crocker, is that still ongoing?
Well, and if you have, a little bit of background on that. Emerald ash borer is an invasive insect that kills ash trees all across the US, but especially here in Kentucky, white and green ash are being decimated by it. But trees really, they can be attacked by the beetle when they're pretty small, but not tiny. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then also when the emerald ash borer first came through, we had a lot of death of those larger trees. But if you're seeing this on a small tree that's still alive, probably what happened is that when those trees were dying, they put out a ton of seed. And we actually have tons and tons of tiny ash in our forests right now. Lots of what we'd call ash regeneration, lots of ash trees in these areas where the big trees were killed by emerald ash borer. They produce lots of seeds. Those tiny seedlings aren't really going to be susceptible to the beetle until they're a little bit bigger. So we have lots and lots of small ash that's out and about. Probably that's going to be killed once it gets large enough. So that would not be a good candidate for kind of looking for those special lingering trees that have some, thing that protects them from the emerald ash borer. When looking for lingering trees or trees that maybe have some resistance to the emerald ash borer, we're looking for those really big trees that without a doubt were around and large when the emerald ash borer first came through the area and would or should have been killed by the emerald ash borer, but weren't. And so that's kind of a like, wow, I wonder what's going on there. Maybe they just got lucky, but maybe there is something special about them genetically that's protecting them from the emerald ash borer. Those are excellent candidates for it. And for the same reason, not really interested in trees that are planted or have been treated for that particular side of things. Just because if they're being treated with insecticides to protect them from emerald ash borer, that's probably why they're alive versus something inherent to the tree.
Mhm.
But that being said, I saw some comments about it. Those insecticide treatments are the best way to protect individual trees from the emerald ash borer right now. So,
And one person said that they had 60 acres of Oriental bittersweet
Oh
spreading
my
like
gosh.
wildfire. 60% has at least some issues. What to do?
Where are we? I wonder where we're at. I know there's been some helicopter spraying and some other things, but I mean, that's a pretty intensive infestation. Dr. Crocker, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on, I mean, hopefully you're working with a natural resource professional, right? That would be my first thing. If you're not, please do so, right? Because they can bring in a lot of expertise and connect you with some programs that can kind of help you deal with that serious invasion you've got. So hopefully that would be my first thought, is work with a natural resource professional, either a forester, wildlife biologist, somebody from NRCS, somebody that can help you get a handle on those invasives and kind of develop a strategy to deal with them. There are some wider spread kind of ways that we've been treating, big infestations. We've seen domesticators and other things come in and basically just clear an area that's completely covered in invasive species, and we can follow it up with sprays and other things to kind of treat that. There's also been some success with some aerial applications of herbicides on intensive infestation. So I would suggest start with your local natural resource professional and work through them, and they can make you aware and connect you with some of these programs and opportunities to help you deal with them on your own property.
All right. Well, Frannie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you showing us that. Those apps were really cool.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, so glad to have Frannie part of the team. Thank you, Frannie.
Yes, yes. All right. So, Dr. Crocker, thank you so much for being here. And we've got another installment of What's Bugging My Tree.
We do. It's spring, or I guess it's summer. I'm not sure.
It
But
goes back and
today-
forth. I was wearing a hoodie yesterday.
It's wet, and it's we're starting to see a lot of different kind of issues on leaves of trees, mostly fungal issues that are certainly being promoted by this wet weather. So while a lot of these are things that we might see every year, little dead patches on leaves, brown leaves, crumpled leaves, that kind of thing in the late spring, early summer. This year, I think we're seeing an extra amount of them, likely due to the weather. So when it is wet like this continuously, those are excellent conditions for the fungi that are going to be infecting these leaves and causing these little dead patches. And there are lots of different ones out there. We could do many a show on what are all the weird fungi on the leaves of your trees. But today we're going to talk about one of them that's common, but you, depending on where you're at, might be seeing other things as well.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, and I will say that some of these can be difficult to distinguish. We're going to give you a few tips about that, but we do have a fantastic diagnostic lab that's tied to the county extension offices. So if you're seeing things and trying to figure out what's going on, they're a great resource.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Becker.
Anthracnose is a common fungal disease of shade trees. It pops up each year in the spring and can look pretty bad with trees that have dead leaves, dark patches on them, and trees might even drop all their leaves. However, while this looks bad, those trees typically bounce back, and there's very minimal damage to those trees, although there are some exceptions. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about what anthracnose is, how to recognize it, and what you can do about it. Anthracnose is a general name for the disease that's caused by a group of fungal pathogens. And the type of disease that it causes is typically in the leaves. So it might cause dead patches in those leaves, typically right along a vein and spreading out from there, kind of where you'd imagine water pooling. It might also cause distortion of those leaves, cupping or curling, weirdly shaped leaves. Because of this, trees might drop their leaves. And in some plants, some tree species, it can also move into the branches, into those shoots and those buds. In those cases, it typically causes more damage because not only is it impacting those leaves, but also that new growth, which is very important. There are some things that can look similar to anthracnose from other fungal diseases that pop up this time of year to more serious issues, and being able to tell them apart is really important. So if you have any questions about whether what you're seeing is anthracnose or if it's something else, be sure to reach out to your local extension agent or local arborist. Many different trees get anthracnose, from sycamores to oaks to maples to smaller trees like dogwood. It's a really wide range, and the type of disease that's caused depends on both the species of fungus and the tree species that it's on. There are actually lots of different anthracnose species that cause this disease, and they tend to be pretty host specific. So it's unlikely that your disease in one tree is going to move to a different tree of a different species in your yard. Even though the symptoms might look the same, they're actually different species of fungi that are causing that. On some tree species, anthracnose is much more serious. Species like dogwood and sycamore, and a lot of times this comes because it will move into the shoots and not just stay on those leaves. Disease varies year to year, and how bad symptoms are is going to depend somewhat on the weather that we get in the spring. Fungi that cause anthracnose really like those wet, cool conditions. So if we've got a lot of those when leaves are coming out, you could expect to see more anthracnose. Those anthracnose fungi survive in buds, in shoots, in dead tissue, so that can spread those spores to the next generation of growth, overwintering that way so that then they can infect that fresh tissue the following spring. In most cases, there's no management that's needed for anthracnose. Although things might look bad, those trees recover rapidly, and the damage tends to be pretty cosmetic. Sometimes trees will even drop all their leaves and put on a new flush of leaves if they have a really severe infection. And while that's a good strategy for those trees, it can also stress those trees because that's a drain on their energy. So if that's happening year after year, it could be something that contributes to the overall decline of those trees. As with many different tree issues, promoting the health of your trees in general will go a long way to enabling them to defend themselves against anthracnose as well as other diseases and insect problems. This could be watering your trees if you have a severe drought, making sure that they have a nice, appropriately sized mulch ring around them. Sanitation, or removing any infected tissue, diseased tissue, can be helpful with many different fungal diseases because that's how the disease is going to infect next year's tissue. So if you want to kind of break that cycle, remove those infected shoots, in some cases there are some really good cultivars available that are resistant to anthracnose. So if you're shopping around for trees for your landscape, think about that and maybe select a cultivar or a species that's going to be more resistant to anthracnose, especially if you see a lot of damage on your other trees. You might have something about that environment that's really conducive to anthracnose, and so promoting trees that don't have that issue will go a long way to set you up for success down the road. For some species like dogwood and sycamore that are really susceptible to anthracnose, site selection can go a long way. So picking a site that's sunny, that has good drainage, that's not going to hold a lot of moisture in there because that's how that fungus likes to spread. Similarly, it may be beneficial to prune trees to promote air circulation, especially on trees that are being really impacted by anthracnose, so that you've got more circulation and less moisture held on those leaves. Other practices that might increase leaf moisture, especially during that early time window, like let's say watering with a sprinkler, should also be discouraged if you're having anthracnose issues, to reduce that moisture and the spread of that fungus. While typically not needed, there are many fungicides that are available for anthracnose, and there's many different brand names and active chemicals, so make sure you check out the labels and always follow the recommendations on those. The fungicides that are registered for anthracnose typically have to be applied as a preventative, so before you start seeing symptoms that year, and they may need to be applied multiple times over the course of that infection period. It's not something that you can do once and be done with, but more something that you're going to have to watch and repeatedly apply until you're not seeing as severe symptoms. Thanks for joining me today with this tree tidbit and learning a little bit more anthracnose. If you've got other questions, make sure to follow us online and check us out on social media at KY Forest Health.
Well, hopefully that gave you a little bit of information about anthracnose, a common fungal foliar issue that is popping up this time of year. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of other weird things going on with the leaves of your trees this time of year. So I have gotten many different photos and emails about this, sometimes anthracnose, sometimes other things, and it can be hard to distinguish sometimes just from the photos. So if you're really stumped on something and trying to figure out what to do and what your next steps are, it could require a laboratory assessment to determine what that is. And that's something that your county extension offices can connect you to. The other thing that I'm seeing the most of this year is maple leaf blister, which is a fungal foliar disease as well. It's another thing that like every year we get it. Every year it looks really bad on those leaves when they first get it. Like it almost looks like um, there's ink on the leaves in the spring, like they almost melt this dark black patchy
Oh.
colors on them. It looks really bad. Like you'd see it and be like, oh my gosh, my
Silver
tree
maple's
is.
covered with them.
Oh yeah. It
Oh.
looks terrible, doesn't it, Billy?
Yep.
Yeah, so you get that and you're like, oh no, what's happening? I need to fix this right now. But the truth is that at this point, it's a little late because that fungus has gotten established on those leaves. It's taken advantage of the wet weather. And it's probably going to be okay because your tree is probably going to bounce back from it just fine. It might lose some leaves, it might have less photosynthetic capacity. So, that's going to be a little bit less energy that it can get. But these are native fungal issues that our trees have dealt with, for a long time and are probably going to be just fine.
Well,
You
at
had-
least that's reassuring. But
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
You had
it's
mentioned in
nice.
the video to cut, maybe you might want to cut that. Now, would you need to cut that entire limb or just until you see the dead leaves and then cut it like right there?
So when it's moved into the shoots, which doesn't happen for all trees and all types of trees, it's really more of a like severe infection type of thing. If you want to prune those out, you would want to go extend that to kind of the healthy tissue beyond where the fungus is in the shoot. This is not at all appropriate for like just the leaves, right? Because you're doing more damage by pruning it out than you would be by leaving it there. But if you're talking about things that have moved into the shoots of the trees, like for sycamore or dogwood, perhaps, it'll cause some cankers in the stems there. And one thing you do want to note is that you'd want to go past that. So if you're kind of not pruning enough, you're not really removing that. But honestly, I don't think that would, in most cases, be merited for most anthracnose. And for those more severe cases, thinking about some of those fungicides, doing that earlier or, not right now, not when you're seeing symptoms. That's not the time for it because by that point, that fungus is already established for the year. So.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering because I know we've had a really wet spring. And so are there other things that are popping up in the trees just because of all the rain that we've had?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I think wet weather is kind of a recipe for fungal leaf issues for all sorts of different plants or any kind of fungal issues. But for us, with our trees, seeing a lot more fungal leaf issues. Now, the good news is that most of that is pretty minor and the trees are going to bounce back and be fine. But we're probably also, what we can't see is what's going on below ground. And I would imagine that we're also seeing increased root rot, root decay, perhaps even some bleeding cankers. We might not notice that yet, but that could be something where over time that could increase decline of the tree. Something that I have noticed, and perhaps Billy, you've noticed as well, is seeing trees that are maybe if they're a little bit off site, let's say it's a tree that likes a little drier spot and it's just growing in a little wetter spot, more and more kind of root disease problems with those. We would call that being a little off site, but when things are really wet and increasingly wet, that could be more off site than normal.
I guess what I'm noticing too in Lexington is that when we have a major windstorm or rainstorm or whatever, you're seeing these big trees that are now toppled over with the roots coming out of the ground. Is that have anything to do with the wet weather, or is that just it could be a multitude of things?
I think what you're referring to was a recent windstorm that we had in this area where it had rained
Hmm.
a
A
lot
lot.
leading up to that. And then we'd had a windstorm and the leaves still had, or the trees had leaf on. And so it
Hmm.
was kind of like a perfect recipe for trees
Hmm.
failing in that particular way, where they kind of had a lot of wind pulling them, but also the soils were so saturated that those roots were really having trouble. They were pulling up. And then on top of that, a lot of the trees that I saw impacted by this were urban trees where the root system has been severely compromised by construction, by damage, maybe putting in a sidewalk or a road or, not enough root space to begin with. So these
Mm,
trees, so to your point, I think that was a lot of different issues compounding.
gotcha.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about how it was so wet and it made it, easier for that to happen. It made me think about my garden when I'm weeding, right? If the ground is wet, it's so much easier to pull the
Yep.
weeds out. But if it's dry, they're just going to break off and those roots are going to hold in place. So I think it helps, helps us understand it a little bit better. But yeah.
Yeah. And a lot
Okay.
of the leaf issues that pop up this time of year, I think it's important to like be on the lookout for them and be aware of them. But a lot of the questions I get, it maybe isn't as severe as it initially seems, and the trees will bounce back. Other things that might be a little bit more severe that you might encounter this time of year might be things like herbicide damage, that unfortunately, if there was herbicide applied and perhaps it was applied improperly, or drifted somewhere it shouldn't have gone, you can get some leaves that have odd symptoms. Maybe are folded weird or have weird coloration on them. There are many different herbicides and they kind of do different things on leaves, but that's one thing that I would also kind of expect this time of year, right when the trees are leafing out, if there's any of that. A little later, as we progress through the season, one of the more common issues that I would see would be something like bacterial leaf scorch, which also causes dead patches on the leaves of trees. But that's going to be late summer, early fall issue. And that is a much more severe issue. That's kind of a death sentence for those trees. It's just going to happen slowly over time. So sometimes if iNaturals is just awesome. We just talked about it. It's a great tool, but you might take a picture of your leaf and it's going to tell you something. But all of those things like time of year are really important for figuring out what's going on. Many different things can cause similar symptoms. So it's valuable for you to know what's out there, what are the potentials, but also what's causing it. Because some things you can say, this isn't an issue, it's going to go away on its own, versus other things might be kind of more severe and impactful in your planning. Either way, something that I mentioned in the video, and it's always worth repeating, is that anything you can do to promote the health of the tree overall, when we're talking about trees in our lawn, in our street trees, and our landscapes, they have a lot of stresses. So anything we can do to promote their health, from watering to creating those mulch rings that not only protect trees from mower damage, which is key, but also creating the right conditions around the base of the tree and the roots can be really valuable.
Hmm. Of course, then when you have them in a wooded forest setting, you can't put mulch rings around things.
Well, they already have their
They
own.
already
So
have
they
their
don't
own,
need to
right?
worry about that.
They're contributing their own. Yes.
Exactly.
Very sad.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
speaking of woodlands, we just dropped in
Yeah.
the chat. If you want to join us this year at the 2025 Kentucky Woodland on a Short Course, we have slots available.
Mhm.
6 online sessions starting in June with field sessions in July and August. So if you want to meet many of these players that you've seen here on From the Woods today, it's a great opportunity to meet them in person, and also see some good practices being done here in our woodlands across the state.
Dr. Crocker's one of them.
Yeah, she's a featured presenter. Yes, we've got her coming up. I'm talking all about woodland health a little bit later in June.
I know, I can't wait. And, that's going to be a little different because today I'm talking about what are the things that I'm seeing the most, the questions I'm getting the most, and that's mostly having to do with trees in your yard. While there's anthracnose everywhere, when we're thinking about woodland health and the issues that are impacting trees in the woods, I'm going to be looking at a different set of things. What has the potential to really impact your woods and what's going on with them, and what can you do as a woodland owner to manage some of that? So yeah, I hope you can join us. And anything else you want to share about that, Billy?
No, the only thing I would mention is that the online sessions are being recorded. So, if you register and you can't make a live session, no worries. You can check out the recording later. We've made them live, though, to give you an opportunity if you wanted to interact with the presenters. So that's a great opportunity. And you could do the online without having to go to one of the field sessions. So you can just register for just the online portion if you choose. But we do have 2 field sessions available for you.
All right. Thank you, Ellen. We
Yes,
appreciate you
Dr.
being
Crocker,
on.
appreciate all you do, really. I mean, you're so important to what we do here out of this department. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. And right back at you.
Good stuff. Excellent.
Awesome stuff.
I know, man, we had 2 heavy hitters today.
Exactly. You can learn how to identify invasives, which on your phone, like that's really cool.
That was
Like
really
you
cool.
have
It's neat
yeah,
tool.
you have a walking Dr. Crocker in your hand.
If we could just all put her in our pocket, right?
I know, right? Sometimes I wish we could.
That's so much fun.
So that's really neat. And then, learning about the different types of, like, there's so much stuff out there, it's fungi, funguses and, something with definitely with wood health, woodland health and all that. It's like, oh my goodness, there's so much to
Yeah.
try to comprehend. It's good that we have these folks that can, kind of guide us and show us how to maneuver this stuff.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Renee. We try to be responsive to what people are seeing and dealing with in their woods, today. We are from the woods today, so we try to
Exactly.
be timely in what's going on. So if you're seeing things in your woods or you're having issues, please let us know. Others are probably dealing with it as well, and if we can help you, we may be able to help others out there that are struggling with something. So thanks again for being with us on a weekly basis. We really appreciate it. We're here every week at 11 o'clock, and it's live, but they are recorded as well. So if you happen to miss any, check us out at FromTheWoodsToday.com, and you can check all of our recordings. I think we're around 250 now, or approaching, so that's a lot of shows, a lot of content. But again, it's for you all, the viewers and our listeners out there. So if we can do better or address different topics, please let us know. We want to help you be good stewards and more informed about our woods and wildlife here in Kentucky.
Definitely. So, that is all we have for today. We greatly appreciate you joining us, like Billy said, and we will see you next week. Take care.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
From the woods today. From the woods today.